So back in 2007, I started my real estate career. I used the Real Estate Tomato to create my very first blog, and have been blogging on it ever since. I've now got many blogs, and last year formed my own brokerage. So things are going great with the real estate company. But back in 2008, I started working closely with the Real Estate Tomato and actually teaching some of these classes. Started off with one-on-one classes, and then we've shifted over to teaching seminars here at Tomato University when we formed it. And so now I've taught over 1,000 hours worth of these, live one-on-one classes like this. I answer emails all day long, and if you have questions at the end of this class, if you still need some guidance, I'm happy to help you. And if it's the kind of thing where you just maybe need some more advanced help, some one-on-one help or something like that, I can also provide that for you. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and start talking here. And as I said, you guys, RJ, you probably picked up already that you're muted. But if you have questions throughout any part of this class, just go ahead and type them in that questions box, and that way I'll know that I need to further explain something and get into more detail. And so that way I can still communicate with you guys, y'all can communicate with me, but it just keeps things a little bit quieter and easier to hear if everybody else is muted. So the whole purpose of this class is basically to sort of try to make your blog the center of your community. We're going to do that by writing topics, or what we're going to talk about today are writing topics and techniques, content organization, building valuable resources, building business relationships, creating fun and interest, improving SEO, and boosting blog subscriptions. So that's a whole lot. I mean, I could break apart any one of those classes and spend an entire hour and a half talking about any one of those. In fact, David just sat in on both of my SEO classes, so we won't spend a ton of time in SEO, but that's sort of the things that we want to talk about today. And the goal in mind is to make your site be a hyper-local blog. And the way I define a hyper-local blog is to call it a targeted and consistent blogging on specific geographic niche with the goal of becoming the trusted authority and hopefully dominating the market in that particular field. Now, when I say dominate the market, I'm not talking about being the #1 Miami real estate agent. It'd be great if you were #1 San Diego real estate agent, #1 New York realtor, whatever. We're talking about niches, okay? And we're going to talk a lot about this idea of how to form a niche, but we're not just talking about the entire market, but you can create a niche or identify a niche and start partnering yourself with it until the point where you have dominated that niche. And I'll show you some examples at the end of this class of different people who have targeted niches and have done an excellent job, in my opinion, of producing content for those specific niches. So there's going to be some great examples to sort of follow up all of this training at the end of the class here. Just some basics. We've all heard 1,000 times real estate is local, but it really does boil down to that when we start blogging. If you're writing things from a national perspective, what you're doing is you're not identifying or you're not connecting with your readers. People want to know about the local real estate market. They could care less what the NAR says about how great it is to buy a home at any given moment and why it's so great. They want to know what's so good about it in this area. Should I be trying to sell my home? Should I be trying to buy a home? Where should I be trying to buy a home? Those sort of things are what people want to know from you as the local real estate expert. Your blog should be easily identified with its subject matter. The name of my blog is My McClellanville. It's pretty easy to identify the fact that I'm going to be talking about McClellanville. Okay, it doesn't mean that you have to have the name of the thing in your URL, but if it's not in your URL, when I get to your homepage, it should be shouting at me. This is what this blog is, and it shouldn't take 15 minutes for me to decipher what your blog's about. I should be able to know it almost instantly when I get there. Pictures are a great way to give me this idea, but that's what we're talking about is choosing some sort of niche and um, making it the focus of your blog. Okay, you can have multiple blogs. We're not going to talk about setting up multiple blogs, but choose a niche where one blog will suffice and will provide you all the leads that you'll need once you really have started to take over that niche. One of the things that I've noticed more and more, especially as real estate buyers and sellers are transitioning into this communication era that we're in, of them being able to get their hands on all of these details, home sold prices, and they know what a comp is, and they know how to pull them, almost as good as you. Now that we're sort of getting into there, the real estate agents are really wanting less of these jack of all trade agents who are willing to work on any side of town, for any kind of buck that they can make, and they're looking for an expert in a specific field. And I always get people who are worried about, well, I don't want to set myself up as an expert over here because I might lose this one little client that I've got over here. If you first of all, if you've already got people who know you, then I wouldn't worry about those. And if you've already got people in your sphere of influence, whatever you want to call it, that fall outside of this niche, they're still going to keep working for you, and they're still going to keep doing things. But setting yourself up as an expert is really what a lot of people are looking for nowadays. When I go on, I don't even go on listing appointments per se anymore. When people call me to come list their property, they have recognized it's never somebody outside of my expertise area, but that's usually because I would decline that. I don't want to work way far outside of my niche because I've set myself up as an expert here, and I don't want to dilute my efforts. And so the same thing with buyer. I get people who say, I'm looking for a home that's over here, and I really like working with you, and I just say, you know what? Let me find you a great agent that can help you out with that. And it's all about not overextending myself, and as a result, it's actually lowers your liability as a whole as a real estate agent, because you're only talking about things that you truly are an expert about, hopefully, that you're truly an expert about. It allows you to focus even more in depth and become a better agent for that specific thing. So, but the whole idea behind hyper-local blogging is that we're not limiting ourselves to just talking about real estate. We're going to be talking about local news, local events, and everything that happens in your community or around your niche. You can have, you can set a hyperlocal blog up to be just about real estate. For instance, I'm going to show you a class or an example later on of an agent who only blogs about duplexes. Okay, so primarily she's talking about them from a real estate perspective, but she's also, that being her hyperlocal niche, she's also talking about them from a perspective of, about care of them, and how to rent them, and some things that expand beyond just real estate needs. But when I'm talking hyperlocal, I'm really, most of the time I'll be specifically referring to a local geographic area. And we'll talk about how to choose the size of that and things like that. But we're talking about everything that goes on in that community, not just the real estate market. Okay, not just new listings, not just buyer needs, not just seller needs, not market updates. We're talking about local news, local events, businesses that are opening in the area, and we'll talk about lots of examples of things that you can write about. And the whole idea behind why we're doing this, I like to call it casting a wider net. Okay, if you think about the block that you live on, let's just take it real small. If you think about the block that you live on, if you're writing about real estate on your block, and let's say that there's 50 people that live on your block, okay, there's probably one or two people that are trying to sell a home on your block. So if you're writing about that subject matter, you're going to appeal to one or two people. Now, when that one of those two people sells their house, they're no longer interested in you anymore. Maybe one more comes up and they want to sell their house, or another buyer comes into the area that wants to look in that area. And so you've got, two or three people, but it's going to be really hard to grow that. If you start talking about things that everybody that lives in that community is interested in, everybody that might consider wanting to live in that community is interested in, well, you've just opened yourself up to all 50 residents. Now, maybe not every one of them is going to log onto your site. That would be, pretty incredible domination of a market if you had all 50 residents sort of clinging to your every word about a neighborhood. I've seen it happen. It's usually these agents that sort of go out, go to a funeral and hand out business cards, and not my style of real estate, but I've seen people, have every sign rider in an entire neighborhood before, and I've got a couple of little pockets areas where I'm at where I've got a definite domination of a thing, and it obviously builds on itself. When somebody goes to list their property and they see a street sign down the street, then they're going to go, they might be more likely to go with that business. But so that's what we're talking about. I call it casting a wider net. And the final thing I want to talk about before we get into the real meat of the discussion is the idea of turning your blog not just into a lead generator, but into what I refer to as a lead cultivator. And it goes back to that principle that I was just talking about casting a wider net. If I now have the 50 people that live in my neighborhood reading my blog before they even know that maybe one of them loses their job, or maybe one of them gets a job transfer, maybe one of them wants to upgrade to a different home, maybe somebody's always liked what's going on in that community, so they're following me, and they finally retired and they can move to this community, or whatever the case is. The point is, before they were even on anyone else's radar as a lead, as some people would call them, I had started to cultivate a relationship with them. Okay, and this is the reason why, and I've, honestly, I've only been blogging for 3 or 4 years, I guess 3.5 years now. But I've chosen a very small niche, and I've, worked strong in my community. I don't write very regularly, and so I will tell you right now, don't use me as the prime example of a how to blog. That's why I like to use other people as examples who are doing great as well. But when I do get appointments, whether it's with a buyer or with a seller, it's less of an interview and more of a, we're going to do business with you because we already know you. We've been reading your blog for, maybe it's a week, but often it's 6 months, a year, sometimes 2 or 3 years even. I've had people contact me and say, I'm finally ready to retire, and I've been reading your blog, and I'm so anxious to go live in McClellanville now, but I can finally, the time has come, and we want to start looking. Retirement's 6 months away or whatever, and we can start looking for a place to move to. And so that's the kind of lead cultivation that I really like, because what it translates for me in is less time that I've got to drive around these looky-loos who aren't ready to buy, or go on listing appointments where the person's already made up their mind that they're going to go with someone else, but they just wanted to sort of, shake the fence and see what, how low I might lower my listing fees for, and things like that. So if we can eliminate those sort of things that waste our time and focus on the real profitized parts of our business, then that's obviously a good thing. And I searched high and low for sort of a fishbowl type quote, and I couldn't find one, so I'll just throw out a quote of my own. And basically, it's better to rule a small kingdom than to be a jester in a large one. And that's what we're talking about. We're downsizing the area that we're writing about, but we're doing that so that we can focus more intently on the needs of those people that are in that community. So let's talk a little bit about finding a niche. Okay, obviously geographic area is the number one when we're talking about hyper local, the local area. The geographic area is going to be the number one point at which we can sort of narrow down our options. And you can choose a small town, a rural county, a suburb, a neighborhood, a community, an HOA, a condo, a city block. Really doesn't matter. I mean, my small town has a population of 500. Now, I work outside of that smaller population, but that might be, half, a quarter, a tenth of the size